All right.
More fun
Hello,
than
everybody.
there.
This is Stelly FD with the Remote Culture Podcast. My partner in crime, the one and only, Mary.
Mary.
There you go. Today, here's what I would love us to talk about, Mary, when it comes to remote culture. Not the most pleasant topic, but therefore probably a really, really important one. How you part ways in a remote company. Parting ways. Well, let's take, for today's episode, not to make the scope too large, let's focus on the time that the company decides it's time to part ways. So you're letting go of somebody, but now that somebody, isn't walking into an office, sitting in a conference room with their manager, having this conversation, and then like in bad movies from the 80s, like they have to go to the desk with a little box and like put all the pictures in there, and they're like baseballs or whatever, like get escorted by security out of the building. This person is somewhere around the world, different time zone. The conversation is most likely not going to be in person. It's going to be virtual.
Mm-hmm.
How do we think about this, and how do you do this as a remote company in the best way possible, and what is even the best way? So let's maybe start with, when we think about parting ways with a person, what is our intent? What are our goals? And then what are the kind of tactics and strategies and the mechanics that we use to go through that process and hopefully do it well?
Yeah. So I guess I would start. This is a difficult topic. I would start with the idea that this is just difficult for both parties. For somebody that's being let go or we're parting ways with, that in and of itself, everybody knows how that might be. And then for the company too, what is our plan afterwards? Because we need to know what that's going to look like as well. So starting the whole approach is that we should try to make this the best possible scenario, even in a difficult time. So we treat this with a lot of care and a lot of thought. And typically when we're parting ways with somebody, it is not a shock to them, to us, to the people around them that have been working. I would start with that. We're not a company that makes these rash decisions. These are oftentimes we've had weeks, if not months, of conversations beforehand. So when we're parting ways, it's often like known by both parties, okay, what's happening here? And we are very thoughtful. We're a company that we're mindful. If you're a US employee, we make it's like your healthcare goes to the end of the month. We often do transition pay. We go as far as to help you with your resume, connect you with other people that within our networks that we think you might be a better fit for. We actually do a lot in that scope. And then we also have what we've come up with internally is a good offboarding flow, a good checklist, so that only the people that need to be involved in that are involved. And then it's a very precise and pragmatic exercise going through this, and we try to make it as painless as possible for everyone involved. And oftentimes what will happen is the manager is the one that will have the conversation with them, and then I often will get on a call afterwards and either do an exit interview or talk about questions that they have about what is going to happen with my insurance, my final pay, what does my transition pay look like, stuff like that. So I kind of handhold that whole experience and then follow up afterwards as well. Yeah. And then there's the logistics too around how do I get the equipment back if we want the equipment back. And that's a whole different ballgame when you're dealing with an international team.
All right, so let's unpack this step by step. I think the most important thing, the beginning, is that we want to treat this with the care and the intention that it needs, because it's a critical time.
Yeah.
Letting go of somebody can be a very traumatic experience. It's a very dramatic experience. There is real consequences associated with it for that person's life and livelihood. And so we spend a lot of time making sure that we will treat them with a ton of respect, that we will give them, support above and beyond, and that we will like treat them in the way where the relationship it's not the end of the relationship, but it's the change of the relationship. And many of the people, one of the things that we are, I think, really proud of is that a lot of people that we had to part ways with are customers of clothes, are people that have recommended us, are people that are retweeting our marketing material, that we still meet for drinks or coffee or lunches, that are still very much part of the fabric and the culture at close, because even if it was painful when we parted ways, the way we did it was something that stood out to them and that allowed them to want to stay in touch and feel good about their time with us. So I think that that's really super crucial. Now, there's a number of things that we do that I think are unique and are very different. So we'll highlight a few of them. But there's a bunch of material that we have in the past, and we can maybe link it up in the show notes here. We have written about how how we have treated people when, like, even in a prior incarnation of the business, we had to let go of half the team in one day, how we treated people that day and what all the positive outcomes that led to. There's an interesting blog post and a video about that we can link up to. We have written about how we treat people, and we have supported team members that had death in their families, that had sickness, that had all kinds of life challenges, how we in the background, how much we try to do to support people through all these different life challenges. But one thing that happens when we part ways that's a bit unusual, I think, is that we will typically, announce it to the entire company after the one-on-one has happened and the kind of that process internally has happened. And we will oftentimes ask for permission from that team member to share their personal contact information with the entire company. So anybody in the company that wants to stay in touch with them or that wants to reach out and ask, is the story that we heard about what happened true? Is there something funky going on that the company is trying to hide? That connection, like, we don't block that channel of communication. We embrace it and we encourage it so that people feel like they can trust us because we're honest with them, and they feel like they can still maintain a relationship or ask if they have any questions that they didn't feel like they could ask us. They can ask that person if they were treated well, if this all happened in a good manner, and what happened. So I think that that's a big difference. The other thing that comes to mind is the support we try to offer people on, like, what's next. So oftentimes we will offer people a week or two after we've parted ways with them. We'll tell them that we block an hour, either with their manager, oftentimes even with me or with you, and they can, they had now 2 weeks to think about what they want to do next. And then we make ourselves available to be a resource to help them accomplish that. And oftentimes that have meant helping them get interviews, helping them get recommendations for jobs, helping them brainstorming ideas on how to get what they want. And we've helped a ton of people land jobs in a variety of ways. And then again, it's something, it's not necessarily, and it's definitely not legally required of us to help you find your next job. But it is, if you think about the relationship as something that should, continue beyond the working relationship not being there, it's something that people really, really appreciate. And not in the thing that people forget oftentimes, and maybe you can speak to this a little bit. I'm interested, actually, because you get so much experience and exposure when we part ways with somebody. Anybody that within the company that's shook or that's, like, rattled by this, a lot of people would reach out to you and want to chat with you about this. So I want you to share a bit about your experience here. But one thing that people often forget is that when you part ways with that person, it's not just your relationship with that person. The way you part ways with them is such a strong signal to everybody else that's still on the team on who you as a company, who we are, what our culture stands for, and how we will treat them if things ever don't go well. So if you treat somebody super poorly and badly when you let go of them, you can't just think, well, the people that are on the team don't care. They still have their jobs. This is somebody that's not part of our team anymore. No, it will affect them. quite drastically. I mean, one, they might have a really strong relationship with that person, but secondly, they might go, well, what if they let me go this way one day, right? Do I really want to work for a company that's like that? So talk to me a little bit about the side effects of the unintended consequences when you part ways with somebody remotely, and there's other people around the world that are, maybe, reaching out and affected by that. What kind of things have you seen, and how have we dealt with those?
Yeah, I mean, to reiterate on that, I think it is really important that we are mindful, because we do care about these people. And it's kind of like, in your worst time is when your character really comes through. And so that's when we want to be as supportive as we can and have our true colors show there. Like, we really do care. And a lot of times too, when we're parting ways, it's because we as a company right now can't offer where that person wants to grow in their career. And so that's like, we recognize that, and it's like, this is going to be hard, but this is actually better for them in that moment, and for their career. So some of the things, I mean, I think the most impactful thing that we do is having those conversations afterwards, where I sit down and look at their resumes and help put those together and encourage them to update their LinkedIn. And it's kind of these tactical things, but it's also, again, where the team does reach out. When I talk to them, they're like, oh yeah, I chatted with so and so and so and so. And it's like, we don't tell people to go and do that, but people care, because you form these relationships just as strong as you would in an office. And so people do reach out. And I would say that's kind of the level of care that we have around each part of the process. I often hear back about, like, later, like months later, then they'll write back and be like, this is what I'm doing now. I'm so happy doing this. This was the best decision for me. And that's always, like, really heartwarming to hear that, because these times are difficult. So, yeah.
Do we always do a exit interview with people that part ways with us? Only when they leave, or also when we let them go?
Yeah, I often offer an exit interview for definitely when they decide to part ways, and sometimes when we have decided to part ways.
What do you typically cover in that interview, and how much time do you typically let pass between them leaving and then having that conversation?
I actually do that pretty much right around their last day is usually when I do that. And the things that I'm curious about are, and usually it's people that have decided to leave, is when these interviews are, like, the most interesting for, or valuable for us as a company. And the things I'm kind of curious about, outside of, like, why are you wanting to part ways, why are you leaving, it's I try to figure out, like, what their relationship was like with their manager, some of the things outside, like factors that maybe I wouldn't have thought of, if there was anything that we could have done differently, touching on a lot of more topics like that.
Makes sense. I think a few other things that seem obvious to us, but might be worth highlighting, is, well, when you part ways with somebody remotely, I think it's even hard for me to comprehend that somebody would think that would be a good idea, but I'm pretty sure that's happened many, many times. You cannot do that in writing. Like, we would heavily encourage you to do this in a Zoom call, right?
Yes.
Video call, so they can both hear you and see you.
Mm-hmm.
Because the way you speak to them, both the visual clues of your body language, your facial expressions, and your voice, it will mean a lot, and it will make it less open to interpretation. And even a harsh message might arrive much softer if they can see in your eyes that you really mean well, that you really care, and that this is difficult for you.
Mm-hmm.
Which is side note, it's also going to be difficult for you. And one of the things that we teach managers at Close is that this is a difficult conversation, and there's no way to make it easy. So don't try. Anything that you would try to make it an easy, fun conversation is going to be a terrible idea, right? This is the kind of conversation where it sucks for you, it sucks for them, and you just need to make peace with that. That's just part of it. It's just a difficult conversation. There's no easy to make it easy.
The
So
one thing that we have done, though, that I've encouraged managers to do when having to do this is write these things out, have an agenda of what you're going to talk about so that you know, because you can go off course very quickly when you've got a pressure situation. So make sure that you have that kind of to lean on. And if you need to, practice beforehand, because these are difficult conversations, and know that you're talking. Zoom is a much better way to communicate this than even a phone call or email. I would not recommend at all.
Yeah. So to the person, those are really good points. To the person, you want to have the conversation one-on-one, if possible, video call. If not, then just call, but you cannot chat them or email them this under no circumstances. After you've talked to, and you should write it out in a script. You're absolutely right, Mary. That's going to allow you to understand if the way you communicate is clear, concise, thoughtful. Otherwise, you are the victim of your emotions in that moment. You might ramble on and say kind of things that make no sense or confuse the person, or at worst, hurt them for no reason. So you want to do that. Now, once you had the conversation live, you might want to send them some follow-up information that's in writing, right? So that's probably a good practice, but you don't want to send them anything up front in writing. You want to talk to them on a human level. You want them to see that this is difficult for you, and that you take it seriously how they're doing, and that you're not hiding from this difficult conversation. You're owning up to it. On the team specific side, it's actually the other way around. We usually send an email to the entire team once that conversation has happened and say, hey, we're super sorry to announce we just parted ways with this person. We're going to tell more information in our all hands meeting in person. You can reach out to the manager or to Mary or to that person directly if you have immediate concerns and questions. Otherwise, in 2 days, we have our all hands. We'll elaborate. And even that, sometimes in difficult situations or more complex situations, we'll have the manager that will talk about it in an all hands, write out, here's what I'm going to say, why we parted ways and how this went down, and share it even with a person. Say, this is going to be our message to the team. Are you okay with this? Is this cool for you? Get the thumbs up, so that we make sure that there is nothing in there that makes anybody uncomfortable, that will not be anything in there that's a surprise. You'd be surprised. People probably tell on all hands all kinds of things that they shouldn't be saying, or that they didn't tell the person directly. And then some team member reaches out to that person and goes, this is what your manager said about you, or this is what he mentioned. And then people get really upset. And again, what does that create? That creates this, I could have never trusted these people. This experience was really poor, so I'm going to tell everybody not to work there. I'm going to do my best to not support this company, which is the opposite of what we want, obviously. Yeah, and then there's there's a number of things that are unpleasant, but this is maybe the whole thing in general. Don't try to avoid the unpleasantness. There's some things about parting ways with people that are kind of mechanical, right, and heartless. It's like, you cannot leave it ambiguously. How long do they have their company email address access? What happens to their laptop? What happens to their healthcare? When is their last paycheck? Do they still have access to your Slack? Like, there's certain things that it's kind of painful to discuss, or painful to the moment the employment ends, to like turn off all these accounts for this person. So you want to prepare them for that. You want to like rationally talk them through it. And as a company, you just want to be like, this is the way the company policy, this is in the best interest of the business and the person. And although this is not fun, romantic stuff to do after a relationship like this ends, it's part of the hygiene of changing the relationship and allowing you to move on. And so here's the checklist, and here's the things that you're going to see happening over the next 24 hours or whatever else it is. And for us, like, obviously at the beginning, we were super, I think, casual or avoiding of some of these items. And today I think we have pretty good process in place, and we're very disciplined, and we just go through these and make sure that all things are in order.
Yep. Yeah.
All right. I think this is it from us for this episode on how to part remote ways. This is, a topic where you can never know enough. You cannot never learn more, find new insights. So if anybody that's listening to us either has questions, needs advice, or has seen and practiced some things that have been very positive in their remote company, we want to definitely hear from you. So shoot us an email, mary@close.com, stelly@close.com. This is it from us for this episode, and we'll hear you very soon.